It was the summer of 2019, and I was driving cross-country with my girlfriend at the time, Megan. We had been dating for about a year, and this was supposed to be a kind of test run of our relationship. A long road trip to see how we handled stress together. By the third night, we were exhausted. We had been driving through back roads in Arizona, miles away from any major town. The desert seemed endless. Flat stretches of dirt, cactus, and heat shimmering on the horizon. By the time the sun set, we were both cranky, hungry, and ready to crash for the night. We hadn't booked a hotel in advance, which was mistake number one. Service was terrible out there, and every time we tried to look something up, our phones lost signal. Eventually, we saw one of those old-fashioned signs glowing faintly in the distance. Desert View Motel Vacancy. It looked run down even from the road, but it was the only option we had. We pulled into the cracked parking lot, gravel crunching under the tires. There were maybe 6 rooms total, lined up in a row. Only one other car was there. A beat-up pickup truck with rust eating away at its sides. The lobby wasn't much of a lobby, just a small office with buzzing fluorescent lights. An old man sat behind the counter, his skin leathery from years of sun. He smiled too wide when we walked in. "Room for 2?" he asked. His voice was raspy, like he'd been smoking for decades. We nodded, and he slid a key across the counter. It wasn't even a card. An actual brass key with the number 3 engraved on it. As he did, he said something that stuck with me. "You two be careful. Folks tend to wander at night out here." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, but his face stayed completely serious. The room itself was exactly what you'd expect from a cheap desert motel. Peeling wallpaper, scratchy blankets, the smell of mildew in the air. Megan was creeped out instantly, but I told her it was fine, that we'd just get some sleep and leave early. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound outside. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard gravel crunching. Slow, heavy footsteps right outside our door. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. Megan stirred beside me, asking what was wrong. I motioned for her to stay quiet. The footsteps stopped directly outside our room. And then came the sound of someone dragging their fingernails slowly across the door. Megan's eyes went wide. She whispered, "Call the front desk." But of course, there was no phone in the room, and we didn't have signal. The scratching went on for a full minute. Then silence. I finally worked up the courage to peek through the blinds, but I didn't see anyone. Just the empty parking lot, lit by a single flickering lamp. Eventually, we convinced ourselves it was nothing. Maybe an animal, maybe our imagination. But just as I was starting to drift off again, Megan shook me awake. "Look," she whispered. On the inside of our window, written in the condensation from the AC, was a single word. "Stay." We both froze. There was no way anyone could have written it from the outside. It was on the inside of the glass. I grabbed our bags immediately. I didn't care what time it was. I didn't care that we hadn't slept. We were leaving. When we stepped outside, the lot was completely empty. The old pickup truck was gone. The office light was off. It looked like the motel was abandoned entirely. We drove for hours until we hit the next town. When we told the clerk at a gas station what happened, he frowned and said, "That place hasn't been open in years. They shut it down after some murders back in the 80s. Are you sure that's where you stayed?" Megan and I didn't even respond. We just stared at each other, realizing the Desert View Motel might not have been real, or at least not anymore. To this day, neither of us can explain how we got a key, or who the old man behind the desk really was. We drove for hours until we hit the next town. The gas station lights glowed under the desert night, a lonely beacon of civilization after the nightmare we had just left behind. When we told the clerk at a gas station what happened, he frowned and said, "That place hasn't been open in years. They shut it down after some murders back in the 80s. Are you sure that's where you stayed?" he asked, his tone heavy with disbelief. Megan and I didn't even respond. We just stared at each other, the weight of what he said sinking in, realizing the Desert View Motel might not have been real, or at least not anymore. To this day, neither of us can explain how we got a key, or who the old man behind the desk really was.